Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, January 17th, 2020, and I recently came across this article from the Morning Consult about why Bernie Sanders is electable too. So they actually placed Joe Biden against Bernie Sanders in different groups of people and compared how they would have voted in an election between Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders and an election between Donald Trump and, of course, Joe Biden. So pretty much, key takeaways here is that Sanders actually performs pretty even with Joe Biden, if not better, in certain age groups. Now, obviously, we already know that Bernie Sanders has the young vote, but this video is going to be questioning whether or not Bernie Sanders is actually more electable than Joe Biden. One thing that I'm pretty consistent about in all my videos is that Joe Biden does outperform Bernie Sanders based off of numbers, and to be completely honest, yes, Bernie Sanders may be able to get out more crowds, but I don't necessarily see Bernie Sanders getting out a lot more of the crucial vote to the Democratic Party. What I mean by that is the minority vote. I definitely think that Joe Biden is much better in terms of getting out African-American votes for the Democratic Party than Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders may get out young voters, but in reality, a lot of them don't even end up voting anyway, and if Bernie Sanders was able to introduce this electorate back into the voting area and putting an emphasis on them, building them up to be a bigger block of the voting groups, then maybe you could counteract or I guess be on par with what Joe Biden can do with minority groups. But the Democratic Party is likely going to go with their safest bet based off of just his ties to President Barack Obama and overall experience in the United States Senate and working on campaigns, running a political campaign. Now, Bernie Sanders, sure, he has the 2016 campaign for experience, ran in the Democratic primary, also been in the Senate way longer, I actually think, than Joe Biden. But at the same time, Joe Biden has actually been inside of the White House and served as vice president under one of the Democratic Party's favorite presidents and also the first black president of the United States, which is definitely going to hold a lot of weight in this primary. I mean, guarantee it 100%. But in terms of the older age group, Biden does outperform Bernie Sanders, but not as much of a margin than I thought. I did expect Donald Trump to perform a little bit better against both of them, by the way, but I did expect Joe Biden to be maybe 50% with this age group because if you look at the national polls, he is doing pretty well there, and a lot of the voting groups that they're polling, because they do typically do landline polls, are this age group, typically above 40. And then Bernie Sanders, I mean, I expected him to not have as much support. He definitely did not have the same, I guess, comparable support amongst older voters when he was up against Hillary Clinton, so he's definitely made improvements there, or Joe Biden has just gone down. But at the end of the day, they're about even. In terms of African-American voters, African-American younger voters, Sanders takes more of that percentage than Joe Biden. Now, in the general election, that may hold up true, but in this primary season, it really looks like Joe Biden is going to carry the predominantly African-American Democratic states. When I mean that, I mean the majority of the Democratic primary voters are African-American or plurality. For example, a state like Mississippi, where the African-American vote may not be the majority, but definitely has a huge influence on how the Democratic primary ends up for each candidate. Sorry, I just put an ice cube in my mouth because it's really hot. But so the older African-American voters, Sanders and Biden, are practically in a tie. College-educated white voters, Biden takes more voters there. Non-college educated, an exact tie at 36%. We don't have to worry about Trump voters. Independence is what a lot of Democrats like to make sure to put a pressure on for people like Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders always flaunts that he's able to bring over independent voters more than any other candidate. He looks around even with Joe Biden, 4% more voters, and especially in an election that can be very, very close, that actually does make all the difference. So Sanders outperforms Joe Biden amongst independents. This doesn't really mean much. Top issue security, Biden takes more voters than Sanders, but practically in a tie there. Only 2% divides the two. And if you look at the healthcare issue, Sanders does get more of the voters, 3% more. So that's also something to notice as well. So I used Morning Consult purely for their data with these charts, but I actually want to discuss pre-election data. polling data. Now, I know a lot of you guys are like iffy about it just because of the fact that in 2016, it was off by 4 states. Only 3 states they predicted to go to Hillary Clinton that actually went to Donald Trump, and you can assume the 3 Rust Belt 3 states. But they actually aren't even that far off, and they also give us a pretty good idea. You can't just jump in there. I mean, if I'm disregarding polling data, I could say Georgia's going to be Joe Biden plus 10%. And I wouldn't need data to back me up because I'm saying that polling data does not end up being true. There's a difference between what the mainstream media put out there and said, hey, this is what the election results would be, compared to what the actual data said, and the actual data was within the margin of error except for the state of Wisconsin, and every single state was predicted correctly except for Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and Nevada was expected to go to Trump, ended up going for Hillary Clinton. But the purpose of this is to compare and see how Bernie Sanders does in certain matchups against Donald Trump compared to Joe Biden. So we'll start off and we'll get closer as we move down. So in the state of Georgia, Biden beats Donald Trump and Sanders does not. Now, the reason why I think that this is different, again, African-American support definitely differs here. Georgia is definitely much stronger for candidates like Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, compared to Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, mainly because a lot of the support that he's getting is from the white working class or whiter voters, younger voters. Arizona, Trump versus Biden. Biden narrowly ahead. Sanders losing all 4 polls. Again, an area with heavy Latino population. Bernie Sanders may not be the one. I'm surprised Joe Biden is. Iowa, Trump versus Biden. Trump does lead here by 2.7%, but then he leads Sanders by an even larger margin, so it doesn't look like the data is too favorable for Bernie Sanders, but at the same time, actually, no. In 2016, the data did favor Bernie Sanders a lot more than it favored Hillary Clinton. A lot of people just said the electability argument was based off of not just polling data because they didn't really have the data to back it up. This time, the Democratic Party actually does. So let's just keep this in mind. New Mexico, not much to see except Sanders has a 10-point overall lead not against Joe Biden, but over Joe Biden in terms of margin of victory. Virginia, Biden plus 10, Sanders plus 3.5. Again, a pretty different number skew there. Texas, Trump plus 0.5. Texas, Trump versus Sanders, Trump plus 3.3. So again, Biden does do better than Bernie Sanders in the state of Texas. Same thing, I would say, possibly in New Hampshire. Yes, same thing in New Hampshire, which is pretty surprising to me. I do expect Sanders to actually, if this was actual data, I would expect Sanders to have a little bit more support than Joe Biden here just because of his Democratic primary support from the past and also his regional advantage. But at the same time, this data is done by actual polling companies, so I could be 100% wrong. Nevada, Biden plus 4, Sanders plus 2.7. Pennsylvania, Biden plus 7. Pennsylvania, Sanders plus 3.7. Wisconsin, Biden plus 3.7. Sanders plus 2.0. Florida, Biden plus 2.7. Tie. Michigan, Biden plus 6.5. Sanders plus 6.7. That's actually the first state that I've seen besides New Mexico and the only other state where Sanders leads by a larger margin than Joe Biden. So that is actually the last poll that I can show you between the two, other than probably a national poll between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. I actually want to see how much differs there. Probably not that much. Biden plus 4, Sanders plus 3. So it actually has been getting a little bit closer than we thought. If you remember back, Hillary Clinton at one point led by 12% nationwide. But now it looks like it is narrowing up for whatever reason. But Bernie Sanders being the most electable candidate, I would not say that. Yes, he's able to get out a different type of the electorate, the younger voters that have typically not voted in recent history. But at the same time, Joe Biden makes up for it when we're talking about minority support, and you can see it in almost every swing state. Joe Biden has more support than Bernie Sanders in every single swing state except for Michigan and the state of New Mexico, if you even consider it a swing state anymore. Overall, I genuinely still would stand by saying that Joe Biden, based off of numbers alone, is the most electable candidate. Obviously, when it comes down to the debates, Bernie Sanders does perform better than Joe Biden at debates, but the Democratic primary isn't really switching up that much in favor of Bernie Sanders. In fact, with the whole thing coming out with the mainstream media push for Elizabeth Warren recently, it doesn't look too good for Bernie Sanders just because there's a whole lot of things going against him right now. But Never say never. So that pretty much wraps up this video. Thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.